everyone. Continuing on with this Beatles Complete series, we are moving on down the road on the Magical Mystery Tour today. And, well, the song is Flying. And as usual, we will watch my very first listen to my very first listen together. And then we'll do a deeper dive into the music exploration together. Unfortunately for YouTube, also as usual, we cannot put the music up there. But for the rest of you, here's my first listen. And that's the Beatles too. And so the official genre classification is psychedelic rock. I'm beginning to see that as a pretty standard classification in these more recent songs. Flying was an instrumental that we needed for Magical Mystery Tour, states Paul in his book Many Years From Now. So in the studio one night, I suggested to the guys that we made something up. I said, we can keep it very, very simple. We can make it a 12-bar blues. We need a little bit of a theme and a little bit of a backing. I wrote the melody. Well, that's interesting because I guess this is the first time that I'm aware of that I've listened to something that by the Beatles that is purely instrumental. Has there ever been a Beatles instrumental before? Vlad's shaking his head. I don't think so. At least nothing that I've heard. Which means it's interesting to me that they say they needed an instrumental for this album. Really? They needed an instrumental. Makes me wonder about, okay, what were they preparing for? How did they decide they needed an instrumental as opposed to their typical just song design? Anyway, nice idea though. And then the approach. We can keep it very, very simple. We can make it a 12-bar blues. Good. Set your structure, set your outline. We need a little bit of a theme and a little bit of a backing. And then, of course, Paul wrote the melody. The only thing to warrant it as a song is basically the melody. Otherwise, it's just a nice 12-bar backing thing. It's credited to all four, which is how you would credit a non-song. Interesting observation, too. Well, thinking of it as a song without lyrics, it brings to mind some of the really famous classical songs without lyrics. Everything from Mendelssohn's Songs Without Words, which were written in a sort of song style, but for piano solo. You hear the piano playing the melody, there are no lyrics with it. Or even Rachmaninoff's Vocalise, which was written for the voice, but the voice is simply vocalizing on the melody. Of course, this is a little bit simpler than that. Understatement. But a nice little piece. And I like the way they approached the creation of it. Flying was recorded on the 8th of September, 1967 with mellotron, guitar, bass, maracas, drums, and tape loop overdubs. Well, let's dig into this a little bit further and have some fun with it. This is just an instrumental backing opening, right? This is basically laying out our 12-bar blues structure. And it was interesting reading about that in the introduction, because the idea that they said, all right, we need an instrumental. How are we going to do this? Let's just use 12-bar blues. Well, what is 12-bar blues? Many of you know, some of you don't. Let me just explain it really briefly. It is a chord sequence and design where you have 12 bars, 12 measures of music time to fill up. And those bars are divided in a specific way with the chords. So we're simply using our basic 3 primary chords, and we happen to be in the key of C. And it starts off the first 4 bars, or you could say the first third of the entire 12 bars is simply your C chord or your 1 chord. So we have 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 whole bars to fill up with accompaniment, texture, backing, and that's exactly what they do. It's kind of light. It feels a bit sketch-like, but it catches the atmosphere very quickly. Not a sort of dramatic bluesy atmosphere. It's more of this gentle, has a bit of mysterious feel to it, but not a really developed mysterious feel, does it? It's more like, okay. It has a very easygoing atmosphere. What they do is they use the 4th note of the scale quite a bit. Even the first time we hear the chord, we hear it with that F added in, which gives it just a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of a floaty feeling, because it's pulling us a bit towards the 4, which is a very buoyant chord in the scheme of things. So even though we're grounded in the 1, we are still exploring and feeling a little bit of a lift, a little bit of a rise. In fact, let me take you back to Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, and you remember the opening lines there where he talks about the 4th, the 5th, and so on and so forth, and the music responds, and when we get to the word 4th, we hear the music just kind of lift a bit, because that is what the 4 chord does very, very often. I can't say it as a hard rule, because there are no hard rules in music, but very often it gives us this sort of feeling of lift. If I give there's our 1, and we go to our 4, you feel it just kind of elevate, float off the ground a little bit before we settle back down. And so the fact that they are using that 4, and yes, it's a common blues thing to add other notes into the chord other than the 3 basic notes of the triad. So this is not outside of the pattern at all, but it's a great choice. And we just kind of float and flutter there a little bit indecisively. Where are we going to go? And I love the fact that it's done so gently here in this opening. Let's listen to it again. It's just such a gentle entry. Just floats on the air current a bit. However, we're really grounded by the bass, aren't we? And the drums are just keeping a nice consistency. So we have this, the fact that this, it's really kind of gently placed. It's light. It's the bass is much stronger, and the drums are even much more assertive than that little dum bum bum. But how is it that we find our ears pulled towards those 2 little notes that are just floating there? It's because they are the highest pitches in the entire mix. And so as we're looking at the score here, we can see the bass down here in the bass clef. We can see all the drum activity down here, which is simple but nice. And then this really basic, simple motif here. So light, so gentle, almost as if it's off in the distance a bit. Like it's not coming at us aggressively, even assertively. I wouldn't call it timid. It feels more like it's out, away, and we have to look out to find it or reach out to move towards it. It is because it is the highest pitches in the mix that we end up with this ability to really hear that as the focal point. Waiting, okay, nice intro, very gentle. It's not the sort of blast out of the starting gate feel that some of the Beatles intros have, you know, with a strong chord or high energy. This is different and tends more towards their gentler side. Where are they going with this flying? And I was expecting to hear something some lyrics or something, but no, we just have this. Okay, now we're at the fourth chord, the entire 12 bars. And we are ready to hear the voice come in. But what comes in? And as I listen to this melody, I'm thinking, okay, it fits the theme perfectly. Da, 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 rising, again, moving upwards. Da, 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 da. Again, this little undulation, just slightly there. Da. This is where it surprised me. I expected it to go da, right? So if we're going you know, something starting there. Maybe something like that. But instead, they move us downwards. So from instead of going here, we find ourselves down here. And that one really surprised me. It made me kind of reevaluate my expectations and what I thought was coming in this piece, because it pulled me back towards a more, even the melody itself is more passive than I would have expected. And it takes me back to this whole idea of, okay, flying. We're just, but this is not a motorized flight. This is gliding. This is floating. This is a very easy listening and gentle portrayal of something to do with flying. More evocative than shall I say, pulling us into the experience, making us live the experience ourselves. It's more like we're seeing it off in the distance again. And it is true that he has, or they have left it rather sketch-like. Right there, we might expect it to stop there, right? But instead, by this point in the song, I am so in tune, finally, after really not knowing what's going on at the beginning and not knowing where is this taking me. By this point, it suddenly feels so appropriate, so suited to the title, Flying. Because by this point, I have found a sort of balance of how to relate to it, how to feel it, and what is happening here. They're not taking me on a grand journey. They're not taking me on an exciting flight experience. No, this is more simply a sort of lightweight description or experience of this gliding flight. Gentle. It reminds me a bit, actually, as I started thinking about this in the past few days, getting ready to come back to this exploration, I started thinking about, okay, what sort of image does this put in my mind? Because it's not a really well-developed image, is it? It's very sketch-like, as I said, light. And I don't mean not well-developed in the pejorative sense of the term. It's more like, I think of it in terms of even something like, we could say, you know, those beautiful sketches of flying machines that DaVinci created, and the sort of pencil or pen lines there, but it's not the actual machine itself. It doesn't have all the coverings and everything. It's the sketch of it. And somehow this piece, to me, suits so well this idea of flying experiences further back in time, or the imagination of flight, the idea of flight, like DaVinci's sketches. He never actually flew, right? But he wrote these sketches, and he created this whole drawings of, how you could make a machine that flies. Or I watched a movie a little while back. I guess it was a 2019 movie. What was the title of that, Vlad? The movie that was kind of this fictionalized account of the weather scientists and the hot air balloon. Got it. I got it. The aeronauts. Yeah. And the idea that, okay, that's a more modern movie. It's a 2019 movie. But again, the idea that we're looking back when science was not so developed. In other words, it's the sketch again. The sketch-like feeling of early weather science, or the sketch-like feeling of pre-flight drawings. And they're beautiful, and there's a sort of innocence about them and charm. And to me, this is what this music conveys, is this sort of undeveloped or less developed concept of flight. And so it has this sort of vintage or retro feel to it in that regard, even though there's nothing really musical to me that says, oh, I'm set back in a certain time. It makes me think of some scenario or some quality that comes from an earlier time. And especially after this beautiful instrumental melody, then when the voices come in. It has sort of, again, a sketch, a remnant of maybe some Verdi chorus or something, but it's so light and it's so delicate, and it's just a simple chord progression, but there's something about it that makes me think of, I don't know, some Verdi chorus. Perfectly fit the idea of the sort of images of DaVinci's flying machine. Just imagine, what would it sound like? What would it feel like to go up in one of those machines, assuming they could actually fly, right? I like it. I think it's charming. I think it's delightful. And I come back to the same word, gentle and sketch. And then, of course, comes the next question, or the next idea that I find irresistible. The thought of, okay, it's a 12-bar blues. We all know how richly developed you can take a chord progression and make it be. And the thought of, isn't it tempting to kind of develop this a bit further and see what else can come? In fact, there's one idea that is coming to me right now as I'm sitting here thinking. So we have this opening. And then there's this long delay, right? What if you had a sort of overlay or echoing voice? Something like, well, we could do it down here. And have sort of dueling or two hot air balloons up in the air at once. And I think it could be developed beautifully that way. And when the voices come in, it's even more tempting to take it that way, because then you can imagine, what if you had the instrument, which I'm sure was probably mellotron, but it has a sort of bassoon-like quality to it. So I'm going to call it bassoon just for the sake of sonic, relating to it sonically. So we have that bassoon, and then we have the voices. Now, what if they were both working together, and the bassoon goes dee 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 and holds its note while the voices come dee 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 dee. You know, there are so many opportunities in a piece that's so lightly developed as this. And perhaps I should say lightly developed rather than underdeveloped, because it perfectly suits, as I said, the title as it is. But then it opens the door to so many possibilities simply because it is so lightly developed. There are so many places it could be taken. And it's a fun idea to explore, and one that I feel like, you know, if I were in a group of musicians who wanted to improv on a Beatles piece of music, I might suggest this one, simply because it is the Beatles, but it's not so developed to the point that there isn't room for self-exploration, self-creativity, and a sort of spontaneity, because the 12-bar blues is a perfect outline for, you know, spontaneous jamming improv in a group. It would be so much fun to sit down with a group of musicians and say, all right, let's take this as our sketch and let's see what comes up with it. And, well, it's just me here right now, so can't do that right now. But if I ever find myself in a group with some time to burn, maybe that's what we'll end up doing. And if that ever happens, maybe I'll be lucky enough for Vlad to catch it on camera and share it with you. Just one of those ideas that comes as I'm listening. So that is my kind of deeper exploration of flying. And as I said, I like it. It's charming, delightful, lightweight, sort of thing you could just have easy listening in the background and be perfectly comfortable. And isn't that nice? So there we are, and continuing next time, further on down the road with this magical mystery tour. I'll see you soon.